Well, hello Internet, and welcome to my MySQL tutorial. In this tutorial, I'm going to cover about 95 to 98% of everything you will ever need to use MySQL. And I have a lot to do, so let's get into it. Okay, so this is MySQL Workbench, and you should install it whenever you get MySQL, and I'm not going to go through the whole installation process because that's pretty easy, and everything will be exactly the same on Mac, PC, Linux, anything. If you want to come in here and go and create a new user, you're just going to come in here, open up MySQL Workbench, click on Server Administration, and then you're going to have this pop up, and click on OK. Then going to have to type in your password, and then specifically, you're going to go to Accounts, Manage Users, and you're going to see all the users. The user I'm going to use in this tutorial is going to be MySQL admin, this guy right here. If you want to create a new user, just click on Add Account, and then you're going to come in here, give a username, a password, and all that stuff, and then you can go into administration roles and all of the different things that that user will be able to do. I'm just going to cut it short right there and jump right into MySQL. Okay, here I am in a terminal. Like I said, everything is exactly the same on PCs and on Linux and on Macs and everything. So this would be the command line in Windows or a terminal inside of Linux or Mac OS X. So you're just going to start it up. You might type in MySQL 5 or you might have to type in MySQL. It depends on whatever your system is set up for. And I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to log in. Like I said, this is a custom made user, and you just type in -U for the user ID and -P for the password. Type in whatever password I set up for this user, and here I am inside of MySQL. Now if I want to quit out of MySQL, I just type in quit and I'm out. You can also just press up and log back in and then type in my password again, and here I am again. Clear my scroll back. If I want to show all the databases that I have inside of my database, I just type that in, show databases, and you can see all of them pop up right there. And I'm going to try to stick with convention. So normally whenever you're typing in all of your commands in MySQL, you want to use uppercase letters. So if I want to create a database, and let's say I want to call it test3, there you go, went and created that. And we can also come in here, show databases, and you can see test3 is there on our screen. If I would want to then use that database, I'm going to try and stick with the uppercase here. I just type in test3, and there you can see that is going to be the current database I'm using. If I want to show my currently selected database, I just type in select database, and there you can see I'm using test3. And then if I want to destroy that database, just type in drop database if exists test3, show databases, and now you can see test3 is gone. And I have a link in the description for this video that has all of this listed out, and it's heavily commented. You can use it as a cheat sheet. Now in creating our database, what we have to do is, very often it makes a lot of sense to print out everything, just write it out exactly what you want to store. So what I'm going to do here is create a student database, and you can see here I have student, and we're also going to have scores for both quizzes and tests. And you can see all of the information. I'm going to have a science class, and I'm going to have an English class, and a whole bunch of other different classes as well. And I'm just going to model out exactly what I want my data to look like. Then after I model all of this out, and I give each of my students an ID, as well as test scores and all of the other things you can see right here, I can then break all of this down into tables. And we're going to go through these tables one at a time. But as you saw here, it makes a lot of sense for each of the students to have the first, last name, email, street, and all of the other different things that you see right here. And you can see down here where I have student ID, that's going to be the unique ID for each of our students. And as you're going to hear here in a moment, this is known as a primary key. I'm also going to have my classes and my tests and absences and all of the different scores also stored in different tables. And as this tutorial continues, I'm going to go over how all of these are going to be created. We're going to come in here and we're going to create our student table. So to create our table, you just type in create table, and I'm going to call this student. Put your bracket inside of there, and then you're going to list out all of the data that you want. Now I believe that the maximum length for my first name is going to be 30 characters, so variable number of characters, and this is just an estimate. This isn't a cut in stone announcement. We're saying that we expect 30 characters, but it might go over that. If I want to guarantee that this data is entered, I'm going to type in not null, and then I'm going to do exactly the same thing for my last name. Variable number of characters that I believe is going to have a maximum size of 30, and I want to guarantee it's in the database, so not null. Then I come into my email. I'm going to, again, variable number of characters. And this is the data types that we're defining here, variable number of characters. You're going to see more here in a second. I'm going to say that I expect it to be no more than 60. But in this situation, I'm going to type in null. Maybe the person or the student doesn't have an email, or maybe we won't be able to get it whenever we want it first off. So we're going to say that that doesn't necessarily need to be filled in. Street, I'm going to say variable number of characters again, put it at 50, and I'm going to say that I must have a street address for my student. Make sure you put a comma at the end of all of these. City, not null again. State. In this situation, I know that the state is only ever going to have a maximum of 2 characters, so I'm going to actually put this in stone and say, I expect 2 characters here, and that's exactly what that says. And then if I want to put a default value inside of here, like Pennsylvania or PA, that's how we would do that. For my zip, I'm going to have a medium-sized integer, and I'm going to go over exactly why we want that in a moment. If there's no such thing as a negative zip, so I'm going to say that it's unsigned. Phone, I could just say that this is going to be numbers, but in this situation, who knows if they're going to put dashes or whatever inside of there, so I'm going to say a variable number of characters, and I think that's going to be around 20 characters, and not null again. Birth date, I'm going to mark this as a date, and not null. Like I said, I'm going to go over these data types here in a moment. Enumerated type, if I know that we're either going to have a male or a female, well, I'm going to define those very specific options by using an enumerated type, like that. Let's say I also want to mark the date that they signed up for our class. I could use something called a timestamp, which is also going to give me date and time. Let's say that I also want to have cost for lunch. I don't know, I'm just making these things up. In that situation, I'm going to need decimal values, and that's going to be a float. And then the final thing we're going to define here is student ID. That's going to be a unique number, and it is going to be an integer, and we're going to mark this as unsigned, not null again. And if I want this to automatically increment every single time a new student is created, I type in auto increment, and this is going to be a primary key, which is going to allow me to have a unique ID for each of these students, which is going to help me a lot. And after I create that database, I can come in here and go show tables, and there you're going to see the student database is created. Another thing you need to do, of course, is make sure that you go and create your database, because I deleted it previously, and then say use test3, and that's the name of the database. You can change the name to whatever you want. Now each of the students is going to have what I call a primary key, and let's just go over briefly exactly what a primary key is and some rules about them. They're going to be used to uniquely identify a row or a record, or student information in this situation. Each primary key must be unique to the row. It must be given a value when the row is created, and that value cannot be null. That original value cannot be changed, and it's probably best to auto increment like I just showed you. Now it's time to take a little bit of time to talk about what are called atomic tables. Now, as your database increases in size, you're going to want to be able to keep everything organized. And the main reason you're going to want to do this is so you're going to be able to perform queries really quickly with your database. Now, if your tables are set up properly, your database is going to be able to crank through hundreds of thousands of bits of data in a matter of seconds. If it isn't, however, then you're going to have everything be very, very slow. So you may ask yourself, well, how do you know how to best set up your tables? Well, basically, you just need to follow a couple simple rules. Every table should focus on describing just one thing. For example, a customer table would have name, age, location, and contact information. It shouldn't contain lists of anything such as interests, job history, past addresses, products purchased, etc. None of that nonsense, just the main bit of information that you need. Then after you decide what one thing your table will describe, such as we had students, then what you need to do is decide what things you need to describe that thing. Then you're going to write out all the ways to describe that thing, and if any of those things require multiple inputs, pull them out and create a new table for them. So for example, with our students, if we had a list of past classes and past performance, we would put that in another table. Then once your table values have been broken down, we refer to these values as being atomic. However, you want to make sure that you're careful and you don't break them down to a point in which the data is harder to work with, so that you have to type in mile-long queries just to be able to get at your data. And as this tutorial continues, you're going to see exactly how I build all of these tables one by one. Some additional rules that might help you make your data a little bit more atomic, and if you can't wrap your head around all this right now, don't worry about it. We're going to give examples. But one thing you want to do is make sure that you don't have multiple columns with the same sort of information. So for example, if you wanted to include employment history for an employee database, you shouldn't create job 1, job 2, and job 3 columns. What you want to do is make a new table with that data instead. You also don't want to include multiple values in one cell. So for example, you wouldn't create a cell named jobs and then list that the person worked at McDonald's, Radio Shack, Walmart, and so forth and so on. You want to split all that out. And that brings us back to creating our tables and all of the different variable types. So you have your variable number of characters right here. You have variable number of characters here. You also saw here I have a character. Here I have a medium int. Here I have an enumerated type. Here I have a date, primary key of course, and timestamp. What do all these mean? I'm going to briefly go over all of them right now. Okay, for the numeric types, if you are only ever going to store a value between 127 to negative 128, you would use what's called a tiny int. You could also see here the minimums and maximums for small ints, medium ints, and ints in general. Here are all the string types. You have characters, which is going to be a fixed length series of characters. Variable characters, which you saw that I used a lot and whenever I created the last table, and it's going to have a variable length even though you put a number in there. That is just an estimate. And then you have blobs, which can be quite large. More numeric types, you have big integers. You can see there the minimum and maximums. Floats, which is what you're going to use with decimals, as well as doubles. Then you have your string types. You're going to have enumerated types, which is just like you saw there. Whenever you know that you're going to have a limited number of possible values like male or female, enumerated type works well. And then you have sets, which I'm actually going to skip over in this part of the tutorial, which is just going to be a list of legal possible character strings. And the main difference between an enumerated type and a set is that a set can contain multiple values, meaning that you could pick male and female, for example, if you wanted to, whenever an enumerated type can only ever have one real value. Then we have date types, as you can see there. Date is just going to be year, month, and day. You're going to have times, which is hours, minutes, and seconds, date times, timestamp, and year. Okay, so we're back in MySQL, and if you want to see a description of any of your tables that you create, you're going to type in describe and then student, and there you can see it's kind of messy. But if I shrink it down in size, you're going to see that everything is listed out there exactly as we typed it out. So how exactly do you go and enter values inside of here? What we're going to do is we're going to insert student information. You just type in insert into and the table you want to insert that data into, and then you're going to type out values. And you can skip around onto different lines if you'd like. And here, I'm going to type in a student name, Dale. And you're going to want to type this in an exact order that you set up the database. So we had first name, we had last name, and then we had email address. And if you're working with characters, you're going to want to make sure that you surround them with quotes. And then we could type in our address. And you can see here I can type in, bounce around as much as I want, and my city and my state, zip code, which is an integer, so we don't have to put quotes around it, phone number, which is a character, we have to put quotes around that. You could also use double quotes if you like that for our birth date, mail. If you want to get the current time, this is the information on when this information was entered into the database. You just type in now with the two brackets there, and that's going to give you that. And the amount they're going to be charged for lunch. And then null is going to represent the primary key. It's going to automatically increment itself. And there you can see it. And there you can see I went and filled in a whole bunch of other student information just like we did before. We can clear that out of there. If we then want to show all that data, we're going to go select, and we're going to put star inside of here that says basically we want everything. And then we're